I went full tilt participation in the November mass blackout boycott of big corporations for the Black Friday, Cyber Monday shopping period. And here's how it went. I'm Kristen Iris Johnson, a queer, autistic, and disabled screenwriter producer, fumbling towards liberation in a dog-eat-dog industry and an absolutely chaotic world. All right, let's get into it. What is the mass blackout? And it was actually two boycotts, the mass blackout and the We Ain't Buying It boycott. Both of these boycotts were happening at the same time. They were going from Wednesday, November 25th to Tuesday, December 2nd. It is that period around Thanksgiving that is one of the biggest shopping periods of the year. So the mass blackout is a nationwide economic action. It was organized by a coalition of grassroots organizers that was calling Americans to stop online or in-store shopping except for small businesses. This is important. That is the exception to all of this is small businesses, because the idea is to affect big corporations and billionaires, not to hurt people in the community. So small businesses are the exception. Also to stop streaming, to cancel subscriptions, and to make no digital purchases. Stop work if you can. And if you must spend, then to shop small, shop local business, and preferably pay in cash, because then you're also bypassing the big corporate credit card companies as well. This is a quote: "No spending, no work, no surrender. The system isn't broken. It's working exactly as designed for the wealthy," the movement's website said. So we're not targeting small businesses or communities. We're targeting the corporate systems that profit from injustice, fuel authoritarianism, and crush worker power. Now, I can stand behind that, okay? Which is why I was participating in this boycott. It also asked to not do non-essential travel, to avoid restaurants. Again, small businesses are the exception to that. And then avoiding normal consumer behavior. So that includes staying off ad-driven platforms. It's a tough one for a lot of people, all right? Because social media is ad-driven platforms. YouTube, ad-driven platform. But to stay off those platforms unless you are organizing, and also logging off of entertainment platforms, or actually even unsubscribing from them. So that's the mass blackout. At the same time was the We Ain't Buying It boycott, and that is a campaign led by a coalition of progressive groups. And that one was targeting three companies: Target, Home Depot, and Amazon. So it's asking Americans to withhold their purchasing power to protest these three retailers who are cooperating directly with the Trump administration in different ways. So Target for rolling back on DEI, which, I mean, people have been boycotting Target all year, and it has definitely had an economic impact on them. Home Depot, because they're working with ICE, which has been arresting and detaining and deporting immigrants. So, like, come on, what are we doing here? And then Amazon for allegedly funding the Trump administration to secure corporate tax cuts. So this is a quote from Latasha Brown, the co-founder of Black Voters Matter and a member of the We Ain't Buying It coalition. She says, "When corporations align with cruelty and authoritarianism, they must understand that our purchasing power matters. Economic non-cooperation is a powerful, non-violent tool for a free people, and we plan to use it to make America better for all of us, not just the wealthy few." This is the rundown of what these two boycotts were that were happening at the same time. And the intended impact was to hit billionaires, corporations, and those who are supporting the Trump administration in their pockets. Because in America, the language of money is the language of the land. Here's what that looked like for me. I did no big corporation shopping, only small business. And honestly, I actually didn't shop small business in that period either, except for one company, because I had to order some health supplements and I didn't want to order from Amazon. So I ordered from a small business, and that was a week and a half ago. And honestly, I'm like still waiting for these supplements and I really need them. But anyways, so I didn't do any big corporate shopping, no big corporate streaming platforms. All right. So I was off of Netflix, HBO, Hulu, Disney Plus, etc. Now, keep in mind, this is a relaxing holiday weekend where I'd normally be a couch potato. Let me catch up on my shows, right? But I did not. No ad-supported platforms. That means I was not on any social media platforms. The exception was if I needed to go on to look something up while I was working, and that was really because it was part of my job. I work at a small business company, okay? So I was not working at big corporate. The other thing is no YouTube, which is why this video is coming out so much later. I also I didn't know if this was included, but I stayed off of podcasts and I listen to a lot of podcasts. But podcasts is part of like Apple, Spotify, these big corporations, and they're also ad supported. That one was a little funky for me because I'm like, but also the people who are running these shows are relying on these ads. So I don't know, that kind of became like a little murky, but I was like, I'll catch up on my podcast after. So I stayed off of podcasts. I didn't stream music. And I also tried to limit Google Browser because of ads. So that also, this whole boycott for me also included no Instacart, no DoorDash, no Uber or Lyft. And that was a bit of a problem for me because of the where I am and the resources that I have access to. So I'll get into that shortly. What did I do instead? Here's what I did. One, I read books. I also used my library card to borrow ebooks and audiobooks and TV shows from the Libby app and Hoopla. So that was actually a lot of fun. I also watch DVDs that I own. So like, let me tell you, your girl caught up on all the Fast and the Furious DVDs that I hadn't watched. So that was a good fun time over the weekend. I also used DuckDuckGo as my search engine as much as I could, which I did on my phone. I didn't have it on my computer, but that's what I did for search engine because it blocks ads. So that was allowing me to not engage with those ads and for those ads not to hopefully not get marked as like having been viewed. Honestly, all of this, even over a holiday weekend, a relaxing weekend, it was not nearly as hard as I thought it was going to be. And I think that's like a really great thing, right? Like what I personally gained by unplugging was I spent less time on my phone. I spent more time with my partner. I even even found the app Hoopla, and there was another one. I think it's called Canopy. So because my library is like, hey, you can borrow these digital resources. I literally got like an email about that, I think on like Thanksgiving or the day after. And I was like, okay, well, let me see what they've got. So I actually got to engage with a different platform that actually exposed me to all kinds of different content, like a bunch of British shows that I hadn't heard of. I'm like, oh, these seem really interesting that I get to borrow like you would borrow a book from the library. So that was actually kind of fun and like allowed me to like explore other ways of getting access to like digital material. Also, honestly, just like the disconnecting from all of the onslaught of things coming at me through social media or through other ads, I got just like a little bit more of a break and a little bit more of relaxation. And that was a good thing. I think that that was a good way to actually get some rest in a leisurely holiday weekend. My big question when it comes to these two boycotts, the mass blackout and the we ain't buying it, was is this even going to be effective? That was my big question the day that it started when I was like, okay, I'm doing this, I'm beginning, and I started shutting all this stuff down. I didn't know anybody else who was like participating at that level. And of the people that I knew, I'm like, so are you guys seem like you're still shopping? I really was wondering, are enough people going to participate for this to be effective? Or are billionaires and corporations going to be like, there was a boycott? So I do know since then that there are people that a lot of people participated at different levels. So there are people who didn't boycotted big corporate on Black Friday, Cyber Monday through the weekend, but like they traveled or they stayed on streaming and social media. I didn't personally know anyone who was actually participating at like the level that was being asked, which, you know, my world is small. I only know so many people. There's millions and millions of people in this country. So I'm just talking about from the people that I knew, I didn't see anybody participating quite at that level where it was like no big corporate shopping, cancel streaming, no ad supported platforms, don't work, don't travel. But there were people who participated at different levels. A lot of people didn't participate at all because they didn't give a shit. So at the start of it, I genuinely wondered if I was the only one. Like, if anyone cared, am I a fool for even trying? And that was a moment when I realized if I'm wondering this, there are probably other people who are wondering this too. And when people have those doubts, it can keep them from participating because they feel like, I mean, am I an idiot that nobody's doing this? I'm the only one. Or they might only do it half-ass, not going to the full level that they can. They're just doing like a part of it, which it seems like a lot of people did. I'm not going to say that's not effective. Or they just quit early when it gets hard because they're like, this is stupid. I'm the only one participating. Now, I wondered, I don't know if this is a matter of just like the organizers not getting the word out far enough, which is wicked hard. So that is not shade at all. Or is it a matter of people not wanting to give up their conveniences? Like liberals and centrists love to complain while not actually showing solidarity to create lasting change. And like, yeah, I said it, so argue with your mama about it. This is a week-long protest. That's it. It was 1 week, and there are people who still wouldn't do it. There are people who still only did it part way. I also found myself questioning at times, what is the specific call to action to the corporations? Now, I get the message that our purchasing power matters, that we are the economy, nothing moves without us. And for the We Ain't Buying It boycott, the message to Target around DEI, to Amazon about supporting Trump, and to Home Depot about aligning itself with ICE and helping ICE, that is clear. Stop doing these things. And also a bit of, we are punishing you for doing these things. I think for me, though, when it came to some of the other companies, I wasn't totally clear. Staying off streaming, sure, but has Netflix specifically done something? I mean, Netflix is a billion-dollar corporation, obviously, but what's the specific call to action for that company if it's not aligning itself with Trump and authoritarianism? Now, I haven't seen any specific things about Netflix. Maybe it is, but I think when you're including all these different corporations, I think the call to action can be a little bit clear. What is the change behavior that we are demanding from all of these companies with our boycott? And also, what is the plan for escalation if they don't change after this 7-day boycott? That's an important piece to boycotting. What is the plan for escalation? This is why I said the No Kings March was largely pointless, because there wasn't a plan for escalation. I'll get into that in a second. But if there are answers to these questions, the specific call to action, and what the plan for escalation is, I don't have it. As a participant, I did not know what those things are. To me, I think that could be better communicated if that is something that has already been thought of. And if it hasn't, I think that definitely needs to be considered in this process when rallying people together. What's our call to action to these corporations, and what's that plan for escalation if these corporations and these entities do not show a change in behavior? We're trying to hit them. We're trying to make an impact. What's the change that we're looking for? Let me talk about the problem with individualism, because that is definitely at play here. People in other countries ask why we have end dates to our boycotts. Why don't we boycott until things change, right? Because that is how boycotts typically work. That is where they're really effective, is you keep boycotting until something actually changes. The Mass Blackout and the We Ain't Buying It over Black Friday weekend had an end date, and end dates do make boycotts less effective for sure. However, the problem is in America, for a boycott that's this broad and encompassing of big corporate, streaming, ad platforms, and even asking people to not work, people will not participate without an end date. People didn't participate with an end date, right? So we as a country do not have a sense of community or collective responsibility, which is a problem. This is why liberals and centrists complain, but they don't actually participate in left-leaning solidarity efforts. Because by and large, liberals and centrists want to maintain the status quo, and they want to maintain their own privilege and power, but they don't necessarily want to fight for the liberation of all and the liberation of the most oppressed. The most oppressed typically being groups that they are not part of. Most people, in general, as Americans and as the society that we have developed into, are only willing to maybe participate in issues only as far as it affects them, and only as far as it is not too inconvenient for them. Again, this is not just liberals and centrists, this is everybody. Hence my stance on the No Kings March being nothing more than an ineffective party that was conveniently timed. And by conveniently timed, I mean it was timed to be convenient for the people that you're protesting, supposedly not protesting because there was no call to action. And it was specifically planned to be non-disruptive, as well as planned in collaboration with police and getting protest permits and things like that. That means that you are in alignment with the authority. If your effort does not disrupt or impact those who you are speaking to, it is not effective. The Mass Blackout and the We Ain't Buying It Boycotts are different because they are intended to be disruptive. They are intended to have economic impact. Now, at this time, I have not found stats on how effective it was economically, like what the stats were for sales over that weekend. And I think it's probably going to take some time. It's also kind of hard to calculate that because there are people who just bought big corporate before or bought big corporate after and just abstained during that period. But then the numbers are still going to be showing in a positive for these companies. So it's kind of hard to gauge it, but the point is that it was intended to have an economic impact. Now, aside from being a society that is very individualistic minded and not wanting to give up conveniences, which by the way is by design, we have moved from a collective community minded people to individualism and the nuclear family decades ago. Now that shifted us from caring about each other in a communal sense to caring about ourselves individually or our own tiny little family unit, which means that we do not have support systems in place for the disadvantaged, the under-resourced, the poor, or the disabled to really be able to fully participate in efforts like this, on top of which people don't want to give up their inconveniences. Now, people can't just not show up to work without a community system to make sure that they and their family will be taken care of if they get fired. Now, that is an extreme example. Here's a simpler one. Most people don't have community support systems in place to even make sure that they can eat if the only grocery options are a big box. And that is the situation I was in with this boycott. For me, where I live, the only options for food that has the options that I need for what I eat, and I do have limitations in my diet because of my health, because of my disabilities. So I do have to be very mindful and careful about what I eat and the quality of the food. The only real food options in this area are big corporations, Giant, Safeway, Aldi, and there aren't any independently owned grocery stores or even smaller grocery stores that actually have the kind of selection that I need. It's more like convenience stores, little corner stores. And that's cool, but I can't get my produce from a corner store over here. The other thing is that these grocery store options that I also have no way of shopping them without Instacart. I don't have a car. The transportation, even doing public transportation, which in Chicago would have been really easy, which is where I'm from, I don't have that option here. So the public transportation system is not robust and it still involves a 15-minute walk or to one bus or a 35-minute walk to another bus. Now, because I have ankylosing spondylitis and I have chronic pain and limitations in that kind of transportation by foot, I can't do public transportation that involves that much walking carrying heavy groceries. I also cannot walk the 25 minutes to the grocery store, grab those groceries, and carry that kind of weight back to my house. So the only option for me to get groceries is both big corporations and also having to use something like Instacart to get those groceries. I don't have a community support system around me that is like, hey, how do we make sure that these people have food? How do we make sure that if we're not doing big corp, that these people who don't have the resources, these people who don't have cars, that they're able to access food? You know, a community support system might look like groups going to the grocery store or going to an independently grocery store for people who have cars to be able to go do that and bring food back. I don't have that kind of system in place. And like by and large, most people don't have that kind of system, community care in place either, which is why community care is so important. I've been learning over the last few months, but that this boycott also really brought through finding myself in that situation, that if we are going to have efforts like this, we need to build community around ourselves and not just so that we can make boycotts and strikes more effective, but because unity is power in a fascist world. The empire, the oligarchs, big corporations, they want us to be individualistic. That is why they keep us divided. That's what they want, because us divided is how they survive. That is not how we survive. We outnumber them by a lot, like a lot, but we don't act like it because we don't have unity. And we don't act like it because they put a lot of effort into pitting us against each other so that we're fighting each other instead of fighting the empire that is actually taking all of the resources and causing all of the harm to the community and the worker class. So Community, collective responsibility, and solidarity with those who are oppressed, even if you're not oppressed in the same way, is how we, the people, survive. That is how we starve fascism. It is not one group against another. It's not black against white. It is the people versus the empire, the people versus the billionaire class, the people versus imperialism and capitalism. That means that we need to learn how to build these systems of community care for our most vulnerable populations, because when our most vulnerable, children, elderly, disabled, LGBTQ, neurodivergent, are cared for and supported, everybody in society is cared for and supported. When we share resources from the most privileged non-billionaire class to the most marginalized, everyone can thrive. And that means that those with privilege, with resources, and with access need to be willing to give up systemic privilege built on the oppression of the marginalized to make sure that the most marginalized are actually supported in the community. Now, this is not about being a savior. It is about being in community and everyone being able to say, here's what I need, here's what I have, let's support, let's exchange, let's share resources at every level. That is community power. That is how fascism dies. Fascism cannot survive collective power because it is built on the subjugation of people, and it is built on the division of people and keeping us fighting each other. So that is why they spend so much time trying to divide us and pit us against each other instead of against them. Their power, like I said, their power is based on the subjugation, exploitation, extraction, and division of the rest of us. That means they are weak. They are weak. That kind of power, that is weak. That is not real power. Community power is built on caring for each other, standing together, which means collectively we have way more power than they do. We just have to live it with each other. And that is like a tall order in our individualist, capitalist society, right? But that is where our power really lies. It is power with each other, not in power over someone else, which is where their power is rooted. So I'm going to share in another video what building community care and support can look like from resources that I found, because I'm lacking community support systems myself. I am learning more about this myself because I feel the need for community care and community support and wanting to be in community with other people and not just trying to figure it out and go it alone, because that has not been helping me and it's not helping any of us. So as I'm finding these resources, I want to be able to share that with you. So make sure that you like this video, subscribe, and also hit the bell so that you can stay up to date on future videos. And I will see you in the next video. Let me know what you think about what I broke down here.